How's it going, everyone? My name is Nick Clement with Access 4 and welcome to MSPland. Today we speak with Chuong Mai-Viet, Managing Director of Fuse Technologies. As many of you know, Chuong has been operating in MSPland for a long time, and in our chat today he runs us through his beginnings with Brennan IT, all the way up to how he founded Fuse, how he's now growing the business and everything in between. If you run your own MSP and want to hear how another has grown organically from a local to an emerging global player, you do not want to miss this episode. Let's jump into it. Chuong, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me.
No worries, no worries. I'm really glad that you can come on board. You just flew in from Sydney this morning, right?
I did, yes. I've got a few meetings down here, so I thought I'd pop in and
jump in,
have a chat.
Have a chat. That's it. Cool.
Absolutely.
So, look, we got a bunch of things to talk about today. I know Fuse is a very exciting company, very exciting MSP, but just to begin with, it'd be great if you could go into a bit of your background. How did you first get into MSP land, and what was the story behind founding Fuse?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, how did I get into MSP land? I think the better question is, how did you start MSP land?
Yeah.
But that's a whole other story. So basically, university, hated it. I was doing engineering and computer science, and I wasn't a coder. I liked the network and liked PCs more. My parents got a job in Melbourne. They said either you sort your life out and get a job, or you come in with us and start a uni in Melbourne.
Okay.
And at that stage, I'm like, I'm not going to Melbourne. As much as I love it down here, and the story will get to Melbourne down the track. But basically, I got a job at a decent size IT reseller back in the day. They were called Leading Solutions, and they used to sell HP servers, desktops, that sort of stuff. And my job was in the warehouse in Sydney, and I literally put RAM in machines, packed boxes. We had big clients, and I was shipping tons and tons of PCs and laptops every day. This was back in the late 90s. And kind of got myself my Microsoft certs. So back in the day, it was called the MCSE. I got my Cisco CCNA back in the early days of the internet, and kind of worked my way up. And I eventually became like a field engineer. And then I got poached by this small company back in the day called Brennan IT.
Okay. There you go.
So Brennan IT, back then, I was employee number 2. There was a bunch of contractors, but the two main owners of the business were Dave Stevens and I'm having a mental blank. Steve Hawkins. They were the two kind of owners of the business, and I joined as a field engineer. And kind of my first job, I was thrust into the limelight. I was told that I am now the virtual CIO of a small business of 80 staff, and I have to sit on board meetings and show up to them every other day and become their IT manager. So that was kind of the early days. And if you think about where MSP land is today, it was quite unusual in the day to kind of outsource the IT management. And that's what happened. So at Brennan, within a few years, Dave and Steve parted ways. Dave sent me down to Melbourne. I started up the Melbourne operations. And then eventually I became, at the age of 24, a general manager of the Brennan IT business. And I ran the engineering teams. I was responsible for Sydney. We had another guy responsible for Melbourne. And, in those days of Brennan, there was rapid growth, acquisitions, the internet boomed. We set up MSPs. We bought telco businesses. And after about 11 years at Brennan, I kind of went through personal things in my life, i.e. divorce, needed a change, and then I kind of stepped out. I went to another company called Ethan Group, headed up their managed services practice for 3.5 years, and then I get to the stage of, well, what do I want to do next with my life?
What's next?
And that's where the kind of Fuse business, but back in the day it was called Blue Source. So what it was Blue Source was a UK business that was being run by a guy called Gavin Camilleri. Gavin and I worked together at Brennan. Gavin was the MD of the UK business, and I rang him up and said, I want to start my own business. Do you outsource anything in Australia? Because I want you to give me all that business. And he said, why are you doing that? Why don't you just open Blue Source up in Australia? We'll give you a bit of equity. We'll give you the cash, the branding. And I thought to myself, I had a newborn child. I had a house that I was building, and it was just low risk. So I thought, you know what, that's probably not a bad idea.
Yeah.
So so that's when I started Blue Source in Australia. But after about 3 years of traveling a lot to London, the owners of the business, whilst they were involved in helping me grow the business, they'd never come to Australia, and I just kind of saw what we were doing. It was back in the early days of Office 365. We were more kind of end user compute centric. Blue Source was more of a enterprise, server management, taking care of FTSE businesses, outsourcing. It wasn't my passion, so we kind of made the decision to buy them out. So we kind of bought them out. We did a management buyout. So I've got a leadership team, but also shareholders in the business as well. I'm a 50% shareholder, and then the management team make up the remaining 50%.
Cool.
So that's how it works. And then what we do is COVID hit. In the middle of COVID, we're like, what a better time to rebrand. And that's where Fuse came about. And from there, Fuse has kind of taken off.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. There's a lot to unpack there.
That's the history.
Great history. I mean, I'm sure it's a very similar history that a lot of other MSP owners and directors probably have, right? They've had their roots in MSP businesses back in the 90s and then eventually grew up into owning and running their own shops. So
So when I was at Brennan, there was no such thing as, a monthly recurring fee for a fixed price to manage IT. It was, you either project based or you buy blocks of hours or hourly support. What we did in the early days of Brennan was we had a bunch of clients that we just used to take care of all their IT, and we just one day said, you know what, let's just turn this into a fixed monthly fee.
Sure.
All you can eat. Sign up all the clients onto contracts. And that's kind of where it all started. And we were one of the first people in the industry to kind of do that for the SMB space.
Yeah, I was going to say, because now, managed service contracts are just a part of the MSP business, right? So what was the sort of transition to that? So you went from basically selling blocks of hours and then realizing that you gained more efficiencies, it was more profitable?
So there was no incentive for us to be more efficient. The incentive was for us to bill more hours.
Yeah, exactly right.
And what you end up doing is you're always trying to prove to the customer why every hour you bill is worthwhile. Yeah. And what we found was that it was up to us, that was the time in which automation started. There was better tools. There was efficiencies in, standardizing approaches across clients. And we kind of took a punt. And it was Dave. He had the recurring revenue business of an ISP. And, once you set up a link, it's all about keeping that link up. And the more efficient you can make that link, the better. It should be no different in the world of IT.
Yeah, exactly right.
And what it was there was no incentive for us to be better. And so that's why we kind of drove to that recurring model. And we basically just said to our best and biggest clients, you've spent this much in the last year. We're just going to turn that into a monthly fee. And we're going to take a punt. And you can ring us as much as you want. And what that did was it kind of helped us, then service the clients, because we knew how much each client needed. We knew per head roughly what it had cost, and then it kind of drove all the efficiencies and all those things, and it kind of made our lives. And then we could incentivize the staff. We could say to the staff, well, if you use less time to manage this client, we're going to give you some of that reward.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah, because all of a sudden their goal is efficiency, so they get hours back, and which might put money back into their pockets.
That was the whole goal.
Right?
We were sick of working 50, 60-hour weeks. And you can work a 40-hour week and be super efficient and still get a great outcome for your customers.
Yeah, there you go. Cool. So you were saying you guys were one of the first businesses who transitioned to that model?
Brennan in the SMB space, there was no one there.
Was that in the early 2000s that was happening?
It was early 2000s,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that was it was quite different. We grew a lot. We won a lot of awards. We were kind of winning market share week in, week out. And it's driven, and it kind of ties nicely into where we're moving the Fuse business, because we're kind of taking that to the next step now.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So a few years forward then, you're working with that business out of UK, starting up their operations in Australia. You then went through the management buyout, but then COVID hit. So that would not have been part of your plan.
No.
Was that a massive roadblock to what you were doing at the time, or did it turn into an opportunity that you were able to leverage in some way?
I think the biggest thing, the funny thing is, the week that lockdowns happened,
Yep.
was the day that we were going live on our biggest new client.
Wow.
Right? So it was kind of like this weird thing where it's like, you're starting to hit a trajectory. You're about to onboard your biggest client in your history, and then COVID hits, and the client turns around and says, "Right, everyone's got to work from home today." So it hurt us in terms of kind of getting the best outcomes for our clients, right?
Yep.
And I think most people at that time were quite flexible. They understood. We did the best that we could. You know, we were driving around Sydney, hunting down monitors and keyboards and toilet paper and delivering them everywhere. So, you know, that was the big challenge. Project work died instantaneously.
Yeah.
But then because of the way our business was structured at the time, you know, it hurt us, but it didn't kill us.
Yeah. Okay.
So we kind of we scraped through, and then the second the lockdowns lifted, things boomed. People wanted to get projects done. Obviously, a lot of people were moving offices, and a lot of people were wanting to put in VC, and then all of a sudden, everyone who had a desktop that physically took desktops home wanted laptops, and so it was just a weird time. But for us, I think, you know, we kind of weathered the storm, and because our business was cloud first, we got a lot of opportunities for people that had older MSPs that were, you know, literally, I couldn't work because
they were dropping boxes, they were running project work, they didn't have a lot of recurring revenue services.
Yeah, but also the other challenge was people weren't into the cloud yet. You know, they were still, you've got servers, and you got to manage those servers, and you know, we're still
talking about the cloud, right? I think people don't realize so many businesses are still not in the cloud, and COVID kind of forced that.
Yeah, so we're still doing physical PBX migrations, right? Like people, but the thing that's changing it is people moving offices, because what's happened now is there's this. So there was the Great Resignation. Now I call it the Great Relocation. Right. Everyone's moving. And what Office Moves does is gets them to look at the technologies that they're using and how to better do it.
Yeah. So I see you guys have a sort of specific focus on the modern workplace. So that's sort of tying into that trend, is it?
Yeah. So absolutely. So we see ourselves as a provider of choice for anyone that needs a laptop to do their job.
Okay.
Right? And the other thing that we've realized now in this new age is that people are working everywhere in the world. Right. So, you know, we have today staff in New Zealand, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Brisbane, Vietnam, London, soon to be Canada. Right. We're a sub 50 seat company. A lot of sub 50 seat companies have people all around the world. And what we've realized is the key is to manage every single one of those people as if they're sitting in an office in Sydney. Right? That's the challenge. And most MSPs of our size can't do that properly. Right? If they don't have global operations, they've got an after hours help desk, which is pretty rubbish. But you know what? The person that's working in London in the middle of the night is probably the owner of the business or one of their most senior people. How do I give that person the same level of service as the accountant sitting in the city office? That's the challenge for MSPs today. And so the modern workplace is the modern world. People everywhere, all the time, giving them the right level of service, regardless of where they are in the world. Making sure they're secure and safe. And have the same communications.
So how does the actual managed services that you're providing these modern workplaces differ to, you know, what you might have used to do with Brennan IT? Is it simply that everything's now in the cloud and everything's accessible from wherever you need it to be? Or is there a specific change in the mix of services that you're selling?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest change obviously is the security side now, right? Security has become so much more complex. People are working from everywhere, and securing your data from everywhere is now more complex. So what we've done is, you know, one of the things that, you know, when you have an MSP business, you say to your clients, I've got a guaranteed uptime on your server. That was the back then. It was like, I'm going to make sure your server's running 99.9% of the time. Right. And so that was pretty easy, right? Now it's like, I'm going to guarantee that you're secure all the time.
Yep.
But there's so much complexity around that, right? Because it's not just the technology, it's a human being that's clicking the buttons that are leading people in the front door.
Yeah.
So all of that stuff now is important. So what we've done is we've built a managed service product that guarantees a security outcome.
Okay.
Right?
And it's not just the security of your device, it's also the physical security of the office, as in people aren't coming in and out?
No, it's the physical security of your data.
Okay.
And your device.
Yep.
And, your environment. So, as I said, offices now are very different.
Yeah.
People are working in WeWorks.
Yeah, that's it.
They don't really care about physical office security.
Yeah.
What do you really lock up in your office these days? Everything's on your laptop, right?
Yeah.
There's no physical files anymore. If you're a professional services organization, short of being like a law firm where you've got like reams and reams of data, which even then they're like, we got to get rid of this paper crap.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But really, everything that you own is on your laptop. So that's all that's super important. Like you look at Access 4, right? You've got some devices here, but you know what? If it got stolen, it's a little bit of money. You replace it and you move on.
Yeah.
You download a new configuration from the cloud and away you go. So that's kind of where we're seeing the world happen today. So for us, it's all about that data. It's the security. It's those sorts of things that are super important.
Yep, cool. So you started in Sydney originally, and now, as you said, you're in Melbourne, you're in Perth, you're in New Zealand. What sort of triggered that sort of expansion, both at the state level, but even internationally? Like, were there key considerations or key milestones that you reached before you started thinking expanding a bit more? Because as you said, you're only, 50-seat company. A lot of people might not even think that you should think about expanding until you reach that, but you're already in other multiple jurisdictions.
Yeah, so I think one of the things, even before COVID, we realised is we had a quite unique skill set that was required all around the world.
Yep.
And half of the challenge is finding good people.
Yep.
And we actually went where we found the people.
Okay.
Right. So initially we went to New Zealand because we had a client that outsourced their IT to us, and they had a really good, operator in New Zealand. They're like, oh, we'd like to keep this person somehow.
Yeah.
And we're like, you know what? We can add her to our service desk because everything's in the cloud.
Yep.
As long as she's got internet, she's up and running. And then if she needs to do field services work, she can just go on site.
She can jump over. Yep.
So we took her on board. Perth happened once again. There were two great engineers in Perth where we had worked on projects with them. They were looking for jobs, and we're like, we can actually use these engineers anywhere in the world. And then we're like, well, it will help us with the later time zones from support perspective. So we snaffled them up. And then kind of my business partner, Gavin, he was based in London. He had thought about coming back to Australia, and life and family and all those dictated that, he's going to stay in London. So we're like, there's no reason why we can't spin up the brand in London.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then because of that, we went, well, actually, we need a follow the sun service desk. So why don't you hire a couple of engineers and manage them out of London?
Yeah.
Next thing you know, we're in London.
Okay.
Right? And so that kind of all happened. And now the reason for Vietnam is, once again, it's hard to find staff to do things in Australia where we want to be cost effective and at the right level.
Yep.
We kind of looked throughout Asia, and my heritage is Vietnamese, but it wasn't my decision. So I kind of left it up to the team to decide. I didn't think we'd ever offshore. But then I'm not looking at it offshoring anymore, because I think now we're a global business and we're just supporting people from wherever in the world we are.
Yep.
And they're our staff. We don't use an outsourcing company. We've hired them ourselves. We pay them.
Yep.
We will have our management team there 1 week a month.
Okay.
We've got the team lead here in Australia now for a month. We're going to rotate people in and out.
Yeah.
We're going to do it properly.
No, that's really good. So that's finding talent. We all know that's such a difficult thing. So I think your strategy there is really on point, and is just as a strategist for hiring. It's I feel like it's perfect, right? You find the talent, and then you pull them
Vietnam, 90 million people, highly educated, English. Speaking can be better, but like I said to everyone, the more you speak English, the better you get.
Yep.
But written and reading English is phenomenal. And, they're a hardworking, young race of people.
Yeah.
So average age in Vietnam is quite young as well. So, and all of the tech companies are investing there.
Okay. So that's finding talent. What about finding customers, especially, when you're organically growing your talent base based on where they are, but then you also want to find customers in those same jurisdictions.
Yep.
Does that sort of change the nature of your go-to-market strategy?
No, not really. So the way we work is we have always been a word of mouth
Yep.
growth business, right? So I look at our 4 last customers, 3 of them referrals from existing customers.
Okay.
Right. So that's a sure sign that you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, for sure.
We also use a lot of marketing, but we don't have a big sales team. So the sales team is 3 people, including me.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
That's the MD, right? And what we do is it's all about, so we have a whole mantra of not selling, right? The sales team are there to kind of reinforce what our technical teams are needing from our clients.
Okay.
We firmly believe that in this day and age, people don't buy from salespeople; they buy relationships.
Yep.
And it's all about building a trusted relationship at multiple levels within a client.
Okay.
So when I look at acquiring clients today, it's things like LinkedIn, it's things like social media, it's things like staff referring clients, it's clients referring clients, it's partners referring clients.
Yep. It's building your reputation.
It's
really.
So that's why I'm on this today. It's all about being a thought leader, a subject matter expert, a trusted advisor. And we've grown because of that. And so we'll keep growing because of that. I think my sales team don't have product sales targets. Okay. Right. They have, Pete, our head of sales, has a company target, but it's our budget, right? It's it's about organic growth. It's about making sure that we're getting our customers the right things. But I don't incentivize him on selling hardware or software or products per se. I incentivize him on lack of churn, happy clients, referral revenue, those sorts of things.
Okay. So do you have more of a focus on new customer acquisition right now, or is it expanding your existing base? And how do you balance that as well?
I think it's a both, right? So what I do with Peter is once a month we do, client white space analysis. And realistically, we've got kind of 5 main lines of products. We've got our managed services, we've got professional services, so projects that come out of that. We've got cloud revenue, which is reselling products like Microsoft, those sorts of things. We've got our comms, so internet links, Access 4, that sort of stuff. And then we've got hardware and software. Right? And what we do is we make sure that any client that comes on board, if it's right, they buy from all of those 5 lines. And if they're not, understand why. And if they've got a clear reason why not, we just say never to be sold, move on. Right? And then when it comes to kind of new client acquisition, once again, it's are they the right fit for us? Right. So I do have a policy of we only have clients that we go after in a certain space. Right. So you won't see me knock on a door of a plumbing company and say, I want to get all your plumbing business. But I will knock on the door of an engineering company that does the plumbing for a building. Like a big corporate, right? So anyone that's professional services based, engineering based, needs a laptop to do their work, they're the types of clients that we go after. We don't go after, consumer sales business. We don't go after, hospitality. That's just not our space.
So, and is that just the nature of the services that you sell and the whole mantra behind the modern workplace?
That's
you
right.
need those businesses.
You need those businesses, but we also want to kind of target a certain space as well. So think sub 500 seat companies, right? Where, if you're a 250 seat company with offices around the world, do you really want to deal with a global provider like a Dell or a HP and deal with, they're just not going to give you the level of service, right? But if you're a 250 seat company with 4 or 5 offices around the world, you want to know that the provider you have lives the same pain as you do, right? And so it's funny, I was having a conversation with one of my customers before this, and I was just talking to her about like my challenges around staff and growth. And she goes, Chuong, your challenges are my challenges. And I'm glad that we acknowledge that we've got to do something about it. And for me, our mantra, the ultimate IT experience. Think of, I use this analogy. Think of you walk into a restaurant, and I don't really mean a fine dining restaurant. I mean a really nice, down the road, your local Italian. You've got a guy that you go to regularly. He knows you. You get a good level of service. When you don't have to ask twice. You ask once and you get it.
He knows exactly what you want
as soon as you walk in the door. There's a relationship there. There's trust. every now and again things go wrong. He's like, sorry, Chuong, we screwed this up. I'm like, no problems.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen all the time.
Yep.
Let's move forward.
That's it.
That's the relationship that we want from an IT experience, right? Like, I don't want to be, Vue le Monde.
No.
That's not what we are. But I don't also want to be that crappy restaurant that you have to ask for water 5 times.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like after the 5th time, I'm like, why the hell am I here?
Yeah. No, that's really good. Like, I think knowing your customer, knowing how you want to position yourself in the market is so important. Otherwise, what your value proposition is just whitewashed, right?
That's
it's
right.
not clear. Customers don't know what you stand for. Your sales team doesn't know what you stand for. Your techs don't know what you stand for.
That's right.
But having a very clear idea of who you are, who you're going to go after, what are the niches, what are the markets you play in is incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we just landed a great client. We'll do a press release soon. But think, they're in manufacturing and commercial fit outs, but they also do work for government.
Yeah.
And so security is a big part.
Yeah.
They can't win government work unless they've got the right security in their IT.
Yep,
but they're a, commercial fit out company, right? So, the challenges that they have, they go to their existing MSP and there's no security, and they're like, government department said we need Essential 8 Level 2 compliance. And their existing MSP goes, that's a $150,000 project, see you later. We're like, no, it shouldn't be that.
Yeah.
It's a partnership. Let's work out the practical ways of getting you there without breaking the bank.
Yep.
So that you can grow your business and we have a happy customer.
Yeah, that's it. So you guys are flying, right? And you've been expanding statewide. You've been expanding internationally. What's next for Fuse? I mean, there's a whole bunch of ways that MSPs can grow. It looks like you've found a good space in terms of growing your geographical footprint, growing by word of mouth. Is there a next step that you're teeing up?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest thing for us is, we've just started up a sales operation in Perth. We also are looking at expanding into North America, in Canada.
Yep.
But we're doing it through partnership.
Okay.
So we're not being greedy.
Yep.
So the model is we will do a 50-50 joint venture with an individual in those locations.
Sure.
Generally someone I've worked with in the past, someone that I know and trust, and we will share the love. Right, so that we will give them our marketing, our back end, our services, our tools.
Yep.
They're going to own the relationship.
Yep.
Because that's important.
They're the ones on the ground.
They're the ones on the ground. We're not going to dictate to them. But we're going to say, this is our target market. These are the sorts of clients that we want to go after. And these are the tools and systems we have in place.
Yeah, cool.
Don't expect us to spin up something totally new and bespoke for you.
Yep.
But if the mothership comes up with something new, fantastic.
Yeah, then you get that as well.
You get that as well. So kind of like a franchise model.
Yeah.
But that'll probably be it. And then over time, we'll probably look at kind of, how do we bolt on additional growth, whether it be through acquisition or other means.
Yeah, cool.
I don't think we have any plans of exiting the business anytime soon. I may, do a little bit less doing and a little bit more kind of working on the business, not in the business.
Yep. That's the dream, right?
That's
someone who started it. Yeah.
So, I think we're kind of dabbling with some technologies in AI and those sorts of things, and how we can next revolutionize the MSP world, using some of the AI tools to kind of drive that efficiency even greater.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
What's the space?
Yeah, and just kind of looking back on what you just said around expanding into North America. So is that purely opportunistically driven by someone that you might know or someone you've worked with before and might be willing to go into that 50-50 joint venture model? Or are you looking at the market and thinking, I need to find someone to go in here?
It's both, right? So the beginning of the year, I went across to America for the Ingram Micro Cloud Conference, and we had some great chats to Microsoft. And what we were doing in Australia, they're like, oh, we wish we had partners in North America that could do what you do. So it kind of got us thinking, but there's opportunities within certain clients for us to grow.
Sure.
There's an opportunity with individuals for us to grow. We'll see. I think for me personally at the moment is, we plan 1 to 5 years in advance, but who knows what's going to happen next?
Yeah, exactly right.
And so you've got to be smart. You've got to kind of work out, change tack. Like we had a plan to do overseas growth within 3 years, but this opportunity came along and we're going to do it in a year.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
and we're not going to say no to it just because it wasn't in our goals.
Yeah.
So I keep an open mind. I think the biggest thing for us as a business right now is, making sure that the shareholders get back some of the money they've invested in the business.
Sure.
That's an important thing.
Yeah.
And then the second part of the business is keep growing sustainably with the right people. So right now, for me, the culture of the business is at a tipping point. Like when you're small, you can kind of get away with being across everything. And then the next step, how do you keep that culture going?
Yeah.
I think one of the key bits that I've learned over the last few years is not everyone's going to think the same way as you, but how do you get across the message passionately?
Yep.
And yeah, for me, I'm just passionate about taking care of our customers. It's not even being the best. It's just being responsive. It's being, there.
It's being available.
It's being a partner.
Yep.
It's being someone you can trust, right? And, that's the challenge.
Yep.
Right? When I talk to new customers and I'm like, why did you leave the old guys? They're like, they had this one brilliant guy and it was amazing.
Yep.
But the rest of the business was rubbish.
Sure.
And I'm like, well, that's what I don't want. I want everyone in the business to be good and do their job.
And that's your challenge as a leader and owner, right? How do you distill that into the rest of the business, knowing that, eventually, as you said, you got to take a step back, and as you grow, you can't be across every single facet of the business.
I was never the best engineer. I was never the best, salesperson. I was never the best at anything. But I'm good enough to be good at everything, if that makes sense.
Yep,
I don't need to be the best. I just need to be good at most things.
Yep, that's it. Cool. So, look, just to wrap things up a bit, we've spoken a lot about your business and where you're sort of going. Taking a step back and looking at the MSP industry as a whole, what do you sort of see coming up within the next, say, 5 to 10 years? Do you think there's some major issues or major hurdles that you think all MSPs are going to have to deal with soon, or any other key trends that are coming?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest thing for me right now is, there is a massive skills gap around security and just we're inheriting some clients that have had absolutely the doors left right open.
Okay.
Just like if I saw that within one of my clients, I wouldn't be able to sleep nights. Right. There's just this lack of care around things. Right. And that's, to me, I think at some stage our industry is going to go the way of professions like the legal industry, the accounting industry, where there's going to be some regulations about minimum standards.
Okay.
I think it's inevitable, right? With the amount of cyber noise that's happening in government, I think there's going to be regulations that are going to be pushed down. I think there's going to be a certain level of certification. They've kind of left it up to the industry to police that. You can see Microsoft now really pushing hard on, minimum security standards within MSPs and, kind of taking no responsibility for certain things. Like, for instance, if you buy a Microsoft Azure subscription for one of your clients and they rack up a multi-million-dollar bill because it wasn't locked down, they push that back down onto the reseller and say, you know what, Mr. Reseller, you sold it, and you're responsible for it.
You're supposed to be managing it.
No different to Access 4, right? Like if you guys kind of roll out a voice system and someone uses your phone system to rack up huge phone bills, you don't go, no, that was our fault. No, you say to the partner, you implemented this, you were responsible for it, you were managing for it. So I think that's going to be a big tipping point. I think that's got to change. I think the 1- and 2-man bands with kind of low levels of compliance and security are going to disappear. You just can't afford to. You get it wrong once and you'll be out of business.
Okay,
right?
fair enough.
I think that's going to be a big thing. I think, though, the biggest thing for me right now is I really do feel that there's too many of us.
Okay.
I think it's too fragmented. I think there's going to be some more consolidation.
I was going to say, so do you think that we're going to see a lot more M&A activity over the coming years?
Yeah, so what I think the tipping point will be is that some people will crack the nut around AI and automation.
Okay.
And they'll start hoovering up the guys that can't do that because they've built the efficiencies in place. They'll be able to drop their price because they're like, I can do this for half the price now.
And with less people.
And then the guys that are left who can't do it will disappear or get acquired. I think there'll be a bit of a land grab. So once they crack the nut of automation, they'll be like, I'm going to buy you for
Yep.
this because I know that revenue I can make this much more efficient.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's what's going to happen.
Okay,
That's
interesting.
my gut call.
Okay. Wow, it's going to be exciting times then in MSP land coming up. It's, yeah.
Yeah, I think this next change is, there's, in my time, the internet changed things.
Yep.
Then cloud changed things. AI is the next change.
AI is the next one. Yep, that's it. All right. Well, I think we can wrap it up there. Thanks a lot for
Amazing.
coming on the show. I really
for
appreciate
having
it. No problem. For anyone listening out there who might want to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can get a hold?
I'm on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn, yep.
I've got an email address.
Yep.
You can work it out from my first name at fusetechnology.com.au. I respond to everything.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. Thanks a lot for coming on, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good.
Thanks, mate.
mate.
Thank you.
Bye.